Welcome to Something to Talk About at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And boy, have we got something to talk about today. This has been a, I guess we could call it a banner year for wildfires, but it's been one for the record books, and not in a good way. It's not the first time that Seattle area has been besieged by wildfire smoke. In fact, Skip Newt Berger, who's a sort of a Seattle historian and writes for the Crosscut magazine and is sometimes on KUOW. He has been posting things on Twitter of requests for rain back in the 1800s when people were living with this kind of foggy, smoky, miserable condition. But we do know that based on what the scientists are telling us, this is, although a historic event in the Northwest, it is also one that we might expect to see more of. So the kinds of dangers in the east and on the mountains are also here in the western Washington area as well. So we've invited Bainbridge Island Fire Department Deputy Chief Jared Moravec to come and talk with us, and Anne LeSage from the City of Bainbridge Island Emergency Coordinator for Emergency Services, and Loren Bast, who's with Bainbridge Prepares. And I know that we have had some challenges right here in our own neighborhood in the last week or so. I saw that there was a fire, a brush fire, or grass fire that the folks in Bremerton, your colleagues in Bremerton, had to put out a couple days ago or so, Deputy Chief Moravec. And I also know that you had a very substantial response, cautiously, on Fletcher Bay about a week ago. So that's something that you were warning us about earlier in the season. Why don't you speak a little bit about the state of wildfire, just this season and generally?
Sure. Thanks, Reed. So I forget how many weeks ago it was that Chief Turan and I joined this group and talked about wildfire kind of earlier on in the season, and now that we're a little bit farther along in the season and hopefully, knock on wood, going to get the tail end of the season in sight before too long. Just provide an update for everybody. So the past 2-3 weeks have been especially busy. We did have what can be described as a weather event that doesn't happen very often in the intensity and the duration at which it did, and that's a big east wind event where we're getting winds that are pushing down from the east and the north. The way that came about was something similar to what we see in windstorms in the wintertime. This time it happened in summertime when things were really dry, and we're still dealing with some of the aftermath of those impacts, with fires still burning on the east side of the state of Washington, fires that are burning in the immediate Puget Sound area, and then the fires down through Oregon as well. So with that weather event that went through, combined with how dry that it's been, there was a phase 2 burn ban that got put into place. Obviously, our fire danger notices went up to a more extreme level of fire danger, and there was a number of significant incidents even that happened in Kitsap County. South Kitsap Fire Rescue, which covers kind of Port Orchard in the south end of the county, they had a number of significant brush fire / wildfire incidents. They had some structures that were lost. One particular incident, they had 2 DNR helicopters that were doing bucket drops for them to help knock some of the oomph out of the fire so they could get it contained and ultimately extinguished. So they were busy, and ultimately we weren't able to escape our turn. Last Thursday, we had a brush fire off Fletcher Bay Road that ended up going to greater than 3 alarms. So our alarm system for fires in the county goes up to 3 alarms, and then beyond 3 alarms, we're special calling additional units from within the county and sometimes outside of the county to come. So that particular fire, in reality, had been futzing around for a little bit in some of the duff and forest litter on the ground. And folks in the area had been smelling it for a couple days, but it took a couple days before it actually broke out and put up enough smoke that we could actually pinpoint the location, because it was off the beaten path a little bit. Wasn't visible from the street, a little bit tricky to be visible from most driveways as well. So it was actually called in by an aircraft that was flying over the south end of the island, a private aircraft. They called 911 and reported seeing smoke that was more than a campfire on the south end of the island near Gasm Lake Preserve. So we had responded units to that to see if we couldn't take a look. We had been out in the area earlier in Gasm Lake with reports of smell of smoke, but weren't able to locate the source of it. But by that late that afternoon, it was pushing enough smoke where we were finally able to be able to pinpoint the location. We had called in Airlift Northwest, the medical evacuation helicopter. We had called them to do a reconnaissance flight for us to help us pinpoint the location, and they were gracious enough to dispatch a helicopter. They were able to give us a lat long for the location, as well as a bearing and distance from Station 21. About that same time, we had someone else call 911 to report that they actually had eyes on the fire. So that all came together really well for us. The fire at the end of the day, it was several hundred foot off Fletcher Bay Road. Back in the woods there. It was on private property. There were some rumors going around, I know, that it was burning on city property. It wasn't. It was on private property. We were able to get crews in there, get a hand line around that fire, get hose lines in there to help finish up extinguishment. But it ended up being about 20 hours for us to finally pull units off that fire and consider it extinguished. And now it's in what we call patrol status, which means we're going out there about once a day just to take a peek at it to make sure that there's not anything hanging out that we didn't catch the first time. So
yeah, you did say something about it starting in the duff for a while, and so there was a risk that if there was something that wasn't spotted, it might ignite again, right?
Yes, sir. So the duff in some of the more heavily vegetated areas of the island is pretty thick. So when you get the fire and you get embers in that stuff, it'll smolder down, and sometimes it'll be concealed, and eventually it'll find a little bit more air and put up a little bit more smoke and start growing a little bit more rapidly. And that's certainly what happened here. The cause of that fire was a campfire that had not been fully extinguished and had burned down in some duff and whatnot, and that's ultimately what the cause was. We did have a couple level 1 evacuation notices that went out for the fire for a couple homes that were close by. Level 1, if you haven't read the city's wildfire evacuation plan, that's kind of the lowest level of evacuation, which means we're going to knock on your door and we're going to tell you, hey, there's an incident going on nearby, and while we're not asking you to leave yet, just make sure that you're ready in case we come back by and say it's time to go. So those evacuation notices were in place for a couple hours for just 2 homes. One off Fletcher Bay and one at the end of Ridge Lane. So I guess the good news is the past couple nights we've had a little bit of moisture, which is great. The only unfortunate part is that it was not even enough moisture to penetrate the canopy of the trees. So if you go out and take a hike in the Grand Forest or down at Gasm, everything's still going to be really, really dry. The street might be wet, your grass might be wet, but anything under the canopy is still pretty dry. So we still have to be really, really careful. The benefit of that moisture is that the humidity goes up. Those finer fuels like grasses, they get a little bit better moisture recovery for us. So the chances of ignition goes down a little bit, and the chances of anything really taking off goes down as well. So we'll take any relief we can get, but we really need to get a wetting rain before we're going to feel good about things in terms of the transition to winter or fall or winter. We need more moisture before we're going to really feel good about things. So
this sounds like it was. I mean, it was not wise probably to be having a campfire where they did, but it sounds like it was an inadvertent activity, probably, and we just need to be mindful. I'm curious about a campfire. Sounds like a known sort of dangerous situation, but are there sort of less risks that might not come as quickly to our mind that we might want to be cognizant of right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we do have burning regulations that are in place for the island. In a campfire, as long as it's less than 3 feet in diameter and you're only burning dry season firewood, so long as we're not in a phase 2 burn ban, those kind of recreational fires are legal, as long as you're at least 25 feet from a building and any type of dense vegetation. You're able to do that legally on the island. And you certainly want to be careful when you do it, and you certainly want to make sure before you walk away from it that it is fully extinguished. But other things too, when it really gets this dry out, anything that can cause a spark around these light flashy fuels, as we call them, can be dangerous. So I mean, it was probably about 5 years ago, we had another pretty significant brush fire off of Fletcher Bay Road, but it was in an open field, and it was caused by a lawnmower hitting a rock and throwing a spark, and lit off the yard and field, and that ended up being a couple 2-3 acres that we were called out on. So you just want to be really, really careful with anything that's going to cause a spark or put a lot of heat down in any type of light grasses.
So from the city's point of view, Anne LeSage, what is the story in terms of support of the fire department, and how have you been trying to be aware of this wildfire risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if everyone on here remembers, but earlier in the year, perhaps earlier even in COVID, we've come and talked about a number of different things relating to the pandemic, but related to wildfire. I'm going to share my screen really quick. So we have developed a wildfire plan for the city. And of course I have way too many things open. Hang on. Party foul. Okay, maybe I won't share my screen. We can try again later. I'll put the link in the chat box. How about that? So on the city's website, we have our wildfire response page, and we created this plan in conjunction with the fire department about a year and a half ago, kind of early on last year. And really what we've been working on in terms of communication and outreach is making sure that people know this plan exists. We did a campaign earlier in the summer called Know Your Zone. We divided the island up into 12 zones, and so we want everyone to understand which evacuation zone they live in. Thank you, Reed. Deputy Chief Moravec mentioned the level of evacuation. So level 1, 2, or 3. So if we were to send a text message out that said, level 1 activation not for a particular area. So we're just putting you on standby, on notice for an evacuation, level 2, or sometimes what might also be called voluntary, and then level 3 is mandatory. And so if we say a zone, of course, we would also try to follow up with specific cross streets. But at the same time, one thing that perhaps not everyone knows is that with Nixle, which is our text alert system, we're limited to 140 characters. And so I always am interested in feedback on the text messages that we send, because we really are limited. So we can, of course, send multiple messages, but that can also get tricky when we're in the middle of a disaster. Sometimes our cell phone towers can get overwhelmed with trying to send a bunch of messages. So really knowing where you're at on the island, what zone you reside in, is a really important thing. So on this page, you'll see some information at the top, and Reed, if you scroll down a little bit to the bottom, there's actually a number of, yeah, there we go, perfect. So we have our full plan that is posted, all of the evacuation routes, our zone map, and traffic control points. So they're really comprehensive. We've done some outreach to the community. We've spoken with the police department. Our officers are, they would be tasked with helping with the traffic control points and making sure we're getting people, to wherever we're telling you to go. So that's just one of the things. It's really dependent on the situation. We might be asking you to evacuate off the island. We might be asking you to evacuate and get on a ferry. We might be asking you to evacuate to, Safeway Shopping Center. It really just depends on the situation, what part of the island is impacted. And so when an incident like this occurs, the fire department is, of course, primary, but at the city, we're here to help with communication. We get out Nixle alerts. If we need to stand up our emergency operations center, we can do that. Kind of interesting timing. Earlier on Thursday, I'd gotten a call from Chief Turan saying, hey, can you put the emergency operations center on standby just in case we have a wildfire? And so that's a part of the responsibility that falls under me at the city. And then last Thursday, when I got the call, we were able to push out a couple different Nixle alerts and then provide some food and water and other support for the fire personnel that were on scene.
Great. Deputy Chief Moravec, there was a question about sort of readiness, and I saw on the screen that we were just looking at that there are things that we can do in between times or in advance to make our property less risky. And I know you shared another URL. I don't know if you want me to bring that up.
Sure.
But you might talk a little bit about the idea of vegetation around our homes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Reed. So the link that I've posted in the chat box is the link to the fire department's wildfire mitigation page on our website. And there are a ton of resources that are available for all of you to take a look at there. And the question that Amy has about recommendations about cutting back trees around houses, that is a great one and is addressed in some of these links. So there's this notion of a concept called defensible space, which means basically providing zones around your home to be able to give the fire department a fighting chance and give your home a fighting chance in case there is a fire. Now, in the past, there's been this misconception that defensible space means a clear cut around your home, and that it's kind of this scorched earth type policy to make sure the fire doesn't get anywhere close, and that's not the case at all. So we call it the home ignition zone. So with respect to cutting back trees around houses, you really don't want any trees that are overhanging your house, not just for fire, but probably for wind as well, or snow. So any trees that are rubbing up against your house, overhanging the house, are not going to help if there's a fire. Obviously, as you work your way from your house into the rest of the woods that might be around your place of residence, we're looking to take the oomph out of the fire before it actually gets to the house. So that might mean trees that are spaced a little bit farther apart as you're closer to the house, and then they can be a little bit more dense as you get a little bit further away. But if you go to those links that are on the fire department's webpage, they'll give you all kinds of graphics and all kinds of information about the recommended ways to be able to do that. My caveat to all of this is sometimes best practice to keep your home fire safe from a wildfire. Sometimes that crosses paths with city regulations with respect to being able to remove trees or whatnot. So I know that the fire department is working with the city to make sure that those two things are compatible. But before you go cutting a bunch of trees down on your property, I don't want anybody to get in trouble with the city. So make sure that you cross-reference with the city regulations. But we are actively working with the city to make sure that we can deconflict best practice for wildfire mitigation and still make sure that everybody's meeting all the rules and requirements with respect to vegetation removal that's in the city code.
Great. Thank you very much. And I will put those links in the video on YouTube. And also to those of you who are signed up with the Senior Center, I usually send out a link to the video and related links. So if you are in our database, you will get a link after this with the couple of links that we just got from Deputy Chief and from Anne. And if you are interested in getting on our mailing list, just let us know. We're happy to put you on there. And if you'd like to support the Senior Center, it's just $20 a year to be a member. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. Loren Bast is also on the call, and he is the Executive Director of Bainbridge Prepares, which is a volunteer organization that partners with the fire department, with the city, and with other agencies, where we as citizens can team together to help put this whole thing together into a nice package. So I might ask Loren, who has spent a lot of time thinking about earthquakes and then about COVID, what Bainbridge Prepares has done in terms of thinking about other kinds of risks like wildfires.
Yeah. So Reed, as you know, we often play cleanup for BIFD and Kobe.
Have you muted their microphones or something?
Jared and Ann did a pretty good job on this call, so I didn't have to chime in very often. No, so, you know, again, partnership is great, and this is, you know, we supplement Fire and Kobe with our volunteers whenever needed. So I guess the only two points I was going to bring up is if anybody's interested in, there were some questions I've been getting about air purification, and originally I was putting some materials together for COVID, and 2020 has just been the year of having trouble breathing, no matter, for a variety of reasons. And so I can briefly speak to that if anybody's interested on this call. But sure. Before I forget, I wanted to plug our partnerships virtual day of preparedness, which is in 2 Saturdays, where if you like some of what you've heard on today's call, you will get lots more of it about, as you said, COVID, about earthquakes, about winter storms, power outages, just everything bad out there. We'll have some information and some you know, more impressive speakers than me give information on this coming 2 Saturdays, September 26th. So if anybody's interested in hearing about ventilation and air purification, I'm happy to do that. Or, you know, I can, if people feel like they are pretty well prepared for that, then I don't, you know, I won't waste anybody's time. So.
Well, I'm curious about that, because obviously there are a lot of products on the market, and we did see a lot of YouTube videos, and I think even Bainbridge Repairs sent one out about sort of a do-it-yourself air purifying system using furnace filters, which probably sold out at Ace Hardware about an hour after you sent out your email. Because we are learning about shortages in the transmission lines with toilet paper and paper towels, and now furnace filters. So some of these things might be a good idea to just kind of think about when you don't need them.
Yeah. So I guess I have a question for like the audience. Is anybody having trouble like this week? Has anybody stayed inside and still had some trouble kind of breathing with the air out there because they maybe don't have central air or anything like that? Okay, well, so
I do know that there are people on this call who have avoided going outside, and I know people involved with the senior center who have been concerned about that, and some of those people may have a air purifier, but they may be living in an apartment building where they don't have any real control over what the central air is going to do. Yeah.
So just you know, Reed mentioned this. I'm putting a link to it, or one of many links into the chat about if you do have a central air system, maybe run it a few more times, a little bit more often than you would on a normal September day, and just kind of put a little reminder this coming weekend when the air should finally be back to relative normal to replace your filter. Because it is dirty. And some folks, including a neighbor of mine, they have radiant floor heating. And boy, I love radiant floor heating on my feet when I have it, but it does not do a good job for air recirculation. And so I had my little box fan, my do-it-yourself box fan system. And that's how she's been able to sleep through the night, by using that. Just a few notes, you know, you're going to hear things about MERV ratings. MERV 13 is kind of the magic MERV number. It's basically a filtration quality that you're going to hear about for COVID, because it is the filter is just small enough to catch, you know, droplets and that sort of thing. But for wildfires and wildfire smoke, essentially any filter, MERV 2 to MERV 20, is going to be better than nothing. So if you got a box of MERV 10s because you've just been holding on to them, then use the MERV 10s because it's going to be helpful. The other question I get is about HEPA filters, and HEPA is basically equivalent to MERV 17 to 20. And so if you've got HEPA filters around, then you are set. So
let me just ask a little follow-up question, because you've probably been doing more reading on this than most of us. When you're looking at something that is as teeny as COVID virus, the filter itself is probably not, like we've been hearing, you know, this mask that I put over my face is not because it's going to stop something coming at me. It's more going to stop me from ejecting moisture carrying bad stuff on it. So is that sort of the same theme with these HEPA filters, that they'll capture the moisture?
They'll capture moisture, and they're small enough that they should capture, you know, basically, you know, viral particles and bacterial particles. And so that's the thinking. So yeah, as we get into the fall and the winter, when you're going to stay inside more often, if you are in a space, you know, especially if a member of your family, you know, contracts COVID, I would say, ventilation will be extremely important at that point. Best to, again, going on the scenario of someone in your family catching COVID, which has happened to a number of folks in the county. You're going to want to kind of keep them to a separate room if possible, and create a so if you can run your air filters, run them. If you can't, if all you have is a fan, then open a window at that point and make point the fan to external air, because you're going to want to create a sort of a negative pressure room for that individual to stay. And you're just basically going to want to get all the bad stuff in that room out into the environment and not recirculate throughout the house and infect you. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, ventilation and filtration are going to have been a big deal in 2020, and will continue to be for the next number of months.
So Rick asked a question that I don't know whether you're expert enough to answer, but my furnace uses those thin 1-inch filters. Are there MERV 13 filters that will fit in that space? And is there a risk of overloading my blower motor?
Yeah, so good question, Rick. So for the first question, are there MERV 13 filters that will fit in that space? I'm not sure. I'd have to, I would do a little bit of Googling on that. I anticipate there would be, but I'm not 100% sure. But again, if all you got is a MERV 11, that's better than nothing. And then yes, the second question you have is very important, where you do need some central air systems are not rated for very high filtration filters, and you will overload a motor if you're running it constantly. And so, you're going to have to either look at in your manual for your furnace system or your central air system, or Google and see what kind of filters they'll take. And be respectful of that if you don't want to have to replace your blow out your motor in the next 3 months. So
I am, by the way, trying to line up somebody with a lot of furnace and heating and air conditioning knowledge who might come on and give us a little more information the next week or two. If I find them, they'll be on our website or in our emails to let you know they're coming. I do put out an email to members every Monday about the upcoming events that we're talking about during the week. And you can also get that on our website, biseniorcenter.org, under the newsletter tab. Any other questions before we let these fine folks go back to their busy lives?
I was wondering, regarding the fire that was mentioned, and that it was on private property and it had to do with a camp fire. Are those people, do they have some liability?
That's a great question. So the good news is that nobody got hurt, nobody was killed, nobody lost a home or other type of structure. So there wasn't necessarily any type of damage or anything like that would come about of it. So certainly from that standpoint, if one of those other things was to occur, then yeah, I would imagine that that those folks would hold some liability, since that fire wasn't properly extinguished. The good news is nobody hurt, no homes burned or were damaged. So we're really, really thankful about that. But it just I think that speaks to the notion of just when it's this dry, just make sure that what you're doing outside, that you're being really, really careful.
Well, Deputy Chief Moravec and Anne LeSage and Loren Bast, thank you very much for joining us again, and you're always welcome to come here and update us. We're happy to spread the word, and thank you for your service to all of us every day.
Thank you for having us.